Hello. Oh my gosh, that camera is closer than I want it to be. um, Hello. Welcome to the live stream. We have a couple things happening today. One, I didn't think we were going to have to talk about economic data, but why do I keep saying that I expected or knew or understood anything these days? Because guess what? I don't. I don't know or understand or can predict anything that is happening these days in the US. It is so unpredictable. But the president of the United States firing the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a pretty boring government agency that creates economic data, exactly what it sounds like. Their jobs report, which comes out on the first Friday of the month, usually before the stock markets open, it Jobs Friday is like it's a thing. Reporters, everybody, traders, investors, everybody is waiting for that jobs report. And one of the things that happens with the way that this economic data is built up is that they go back and they revise previous versions as they get more information. So the jobs report that came out last Friday was not as good as people would have liked. We only added about 73,000 jobs in the United States last month. However, there were two other revisions that came in, and those revisions showed that essentially since Liberation Day, when Trump announced the new tariff regime, things had gotten worse. And so they were essentially, Trump is not happy about the fact that the revision was so dramatic. The revision was, according to some industry analysts, the largest revision that has happened since the 1960s. So this is somewhat dramatic. The methodology for collecting this data is something that is tweaked on a regular basis by many governments. Governments collect this data in different sorts of ways, but over the past couple years, especially since COVID time, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has really been struggling with one of their primary methods of data collection, which is household surveys, which essentially ask people like, is everyone in your household working? Is anybody looking for work? Blah, 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 blah. And Trump didn't like the revision of the data. And so he fired the bureaucrat in charge of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm getting too excited. I'm letting my mouth run away with me. Also, if you can see little feetsies up above me, she's in a mood. So she did just get dinner, but she has been in quite a mood. So he didn't like it. He fired her. Let's talk about why this isn't actually that unusual for regimes that are suffering democratic backslide, which is essentially what we have going on in the United States. I don't think I don't think that is a controversial take at this point. Like, democracy is not very strong right now in the United States for a country that likes to claim that we're spreading democracy around the world. And we're sort of having a little bit of a authoritarian backslide happening right now. And for regimes that are autocracies or authoritarian regimes, control of the data is a good way to control the narrative. So in recent years, one of the things we saw happen in summer of 2023 was that the youth unemployment data in China was not looking good. It was over 20%. And at the time, their definition of youth was 16 to 24. And like all data and statistics, right, you always have to look at the methodology. What is happening? What are you meowing about? What? This is the cat that doesn't meow. Hi, do you have feelings about the youth unemployment rate in China? You weren't even born yet when they stopped reporting the data, Google. Come here. Wow, you're full of meows. Come here. You want to say hi to everybody? This is not the cat that normally joins the live stream. Hi. Say hi to everyone. Say hi. Say hi. Oh, no, you don't want to say hi? And then she does the rest of the live stream with cat hair on her shirt. What do you want? You want to use any of the hundreds of toys you have on the floor? Okay. Geograph Concept says she's an unemployed youth, so of course she has opinions. She is an unemployed youth. Is she still under 24 in cat years? She's about to turn 2 years old. Old in cat years. Oh my god. Stop giving me AI mode. No, Google. Oh, it's 24. So she is still an unemployed youth, because 16 to 24 is the age range in China's statistics. Eric says, we're moonwalking this democratic backslide. Correct. When was our democracy strong? Ooh, that's an interesting question. That is probably a question for someone other than me. Oh, B said a good episode of The Daily came out today about this. I got very upset at The Daily a couple years ago for some insider baseball reasons, and so I don't listen to it very often, but I might have to go listen to that one. Okay, I'm very curious. Who's number one right now? Eric is number one. No, Geograph Concept is number one. I don't really understand the ranking system. I will tell you, I'm in this like YouTube live stream bootcamp situation, like actually run by Google, and I still don't really understand the rankings, but apparently this is a normal thing in Twitch. So they're just trying to become Twitch. Google, what is going on? Hold on. This is the cat that normally does not meow. Is anything wrong? What? Do you just need attention? She just needs attention. Okay, here you go. I really wish my cat cam was working, because I just turned on the automatic laser pointer for the princesses, and now they are both fully engaged. So you'll probably hear a little pitter patter. If they tell you the algorithm, you can game it so they keep it a secret. But also, like, is it worth it? I don't know. It doesn't seem very fun. It's just like how my cat won't tell me why she's meowing. She wants me to try to figure it out by giving her everything she could possibly want. Geograph Concept. Cobbly shopping for Pusheen accessories. I did see they just released earrings with cats holding cups of coffee, and I went, do I need a Pusheen coffee earrings? I might need Pusheen coffee earrings. Okay. So, China. China's economy still really hasn't bounced back and recovered from their zero COVID protocol and how strict their lockdowns were, right? So China in general, really, it had like quite a few blows that happened to it over the past 5 years. One of the big blows was actually in the property sector. So there is... I've done multiple live streams about this, so if you really want to dive into like what has happened in China's property market, but essentially the government, in order to prevent in China the same thing happening that happened in 2008 in the United States, they started putting in regulations on how much property developers could borrow. And property development in China, the way that it was funded was almost pyramid schemey, in that like people would put down deposits to buy an apartment before the apartment building was built. And then those deposits would be used to pay the costs on a previous property that was already being built, and then they would be used as leverage in order to start borrowing to build another apartment building. And so one of their second largest property developer, Evergrande, ended up starting to default on payments. And some of that was due to the effects of COVID on the economy, but a lot of it had to do with just like massive over leveraging. And industry analysts had been saying for quite a while that like that was going to happen in China with the way that their property market was structured. You also have to like, while Americans and Brits are like, we tend to be, even like middle class people tend to, when we save, we invest in things like stocks. We do it through our 401ks, through our pensions. We actually buy equities, like portions of companies. That's quite rare in China. Typically, people either buy property or cash if they are doing savings, and they don't have a very large social safety net scheme for old age. So in the United States, we have Social Security. A lot of other countries have kind of versions of that where younger people that are working are paying into the system. And then when you're older and retired, you are taking from the system. And it's all sort of this, this social contract. That is not terribly common. There's one of those, but it's not like universally used in China. And they have very strict capital controls in China as far as like how people are allowed to spend money outside the country. So it is very hard generally if you are like a middle class Chinese person to go out and buy a piece of a company in the way that like we can buy index funds in the United States, like most countries in the world. Developed countries in the world, it's like relatively easy to invest in publicly traded stocks. That is much harder in China. There is this small link to the Hong Kong markets called China Connect that does exist now, but it's still relatively underused. And because of that, people save quite a lot and they have a very high savings rate. But one of the ways that people save and people do investments, because it is rare to invest in companies, part of that being because so many of the companies in China are, in fact, like state enterprises. So it would be more difficult to even buy equities in them, but also because of the restriction on buying foreign companies for Chinese citizens. So what do people do? They go and buy property, and often like multiple generations of a family will invest in properties. So one of the things that happened when the three red lines policy went into effect, where they essentially started to limit the borrowing of these over-leveraged companies, was that it created a lot of domino effects in the economy. And it was not nearly as bad as what happened in the US in 2008. But it did have an effect. And then you add on top of that COVID lockdowns having a really large effect on like Shenzhen, large manufacturing cities and their economy that were under these rolling lockdowns, and manufacturing industries having an effect. And then there was already, like, I know it's hard to remember, but like a trade war with China has already been happening since the last Trump administration, right? And they are a heavily export based economy. So having their largest trading partner be having an antagonistic trade relationship with them also had an effect on the Chinese economy, combined with like a bunch of other factors that this is not meant to be a Chinese economy live stream. But the combination of all of these factors meant that the Chinese economy's recovery from COVID has been very slow. They also started regulating some of like the major industries like tech and manufacturing. They started doing more regulations on them, and that has slowed some of the growth as well. So what ends up happening in that case? Well, young people ages 16 to 24 are at very high rates of unemployment. So it was over 20.8% in June 2023. And that's when China decided, you know what? We're gonna we're going to recalibrate the way that we collect that data. And it was like heavily made fun of in China when they stopped collecting that data. And obviously China does have a censored internet. So when Chinese netizens, as they are often called when you translate from Chinese to English, but when people on the internet in China were making fun of the fact that like the youth unemployment was so high, they just stopped reporting the data, they were making a lot of memes that made reference to it without actually kind of hitting on it. And then they didn't report the data for like 6 months. They rejiggered the data in that they slightly tweaked who they were counting. So if you were a student and you worked 1 hour a week previously, you started being counted as being employed. They stopped counting students as being unemployed if they weren't working, because they said their like occupation was student. And it's still quite high. Like when it came back 6 months after just not reporting the data, it was still at like 14%, but it was like a 6 points down from the peak that it was at. And this is like one of the big prides of the Chinese Communist Party is, you know, being able to maintain full employment, which is obviously one of the goals of the central bank, and it's one of the 2 mandates of the central bank in the United States. But the CCP, because it's a command economy, has a lot more ability to influence employment rates. And, you know, this is pretty evident if you go to China and you go to any major city, you will see a lot of people working in jobs that just don't exist in free market economies. So, you know, taking the subway is a great example. Like in the United States, even in like a major metropolitan area like New York City or Chicago's subway system or L system, when you go, you might see like there's a driver, there might be security, a ticket person, and then, you know, maybe a maintenance worker. And those are the amount of employees that you would see at like one stop. And if it's a really big stop, then maybe you would see more, right? But in China, there will be like a person stationed at every single car of the subway, sometimes 2. Sometimes there'd be a person stationed there and then another person with a loudspeaker for each individual car door on each side of the platform. And then there will be staff, like a public bus. There will be a conductor on the bus. There will also be someone, like if it's a BRT system, so it's like a more kind of fixed route, dedicated lane bus system, there will be someone at the stop as well that's also employed there. And that is one of the things that you can do if you're a command economy, if you want to keep full employment, right? This is kind of like the communist-ness of it. This was also quite common in Soviet countries in USSR, where you would have a lot of people in jobs that maybe were not necessarily jobs that would exist if the free market had its will. And there's pros and there's cons to this, but one of the pros of it is that you can keep unemployment quite low. And so China historically has had very low unemployment numbers. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has like a level of Social Security that they would. It doesn't necessarily mean they're making a living wage or anything like that. But it does mean that you have good data to report. Duolingo Al staring at me. I've quit you. I'm language learning from CDs from the library now. I don't have a CD player though. How are you using language learning CDs if you don't have a CD player? Because that seems unfair. But I am really close to a 3,000 day streak, and I think I'm going to dramatically quit when I hit my 3,000 day streak. But I refuse to quit until I find something to replace it with that's as easy for me to like build a daily habit for. And because I've been using Duolingo for well over 10 years now. And so I need to make sure that I replace it with something better. But it is it's getting so much worse by the day. So yes, I agree. My Duolingo, I don't like the direction that they're moving AI wise and everything like that. So um there's also so um there's some pretty funny memes in China around youth unemployment. They actually so one, there is the youth disillusionment is like there is like quite a few interesting memes that have been kind of um circulating, and they all require like a level of explanation, which means that I, as a person who does not speak Chinese, will not be able to accurately explain them. So I recommend going and checking out like some of the great commentary that reporters and like popular culture commentators do out of China. But one of the things is that I found really interesting is that there is a uh like there is a name for the generation in China that is related to the property market. So the Gen Z and the youth unemployment generation that's happening right now, where they're kind of finding that like going in, even if you like work really hard and get into a good university and pass all the exams, you are still not getting the promise, which is like, that sounds very familiar as a millennial in the United States, happening a little later in China, maybe. There is a term for them that is rotten tail kids. And rotten tail kids refers to rotten tail buildings, which are the unfinished buildings that have been plaguing China since the bottom fell out of the property market. So there's all of these like unfinished buildings in China because the property developers either defaulted or they ran out of money for those particular buildings. And those buildings are called Rotten Tail. And now the youth, Gen Z, is going by Rotten Tail Kids to kind of describe college graduates that have graduated into a job market where they are not finding anything. So unfinished buildings in China are called Rotten Tail, as are Gen Z. Okay. So why is controlling the data important? Like, why is it important to have this kind of data when you are sliding into an authoritarian regime? Like, one, it's very clear from this presidency that the current president likes to punish anybody he feels opposes him, right? And I think that has become extremely obvious over the past decade of being in the era of President Trump. But in particular, he is currently like ascribing anything that looks bad to him. He's finding a way to ascribe it onto the previous president or even Obama. Like, if we can like roll it all the way back to Obama, he will do that because Obama's one of his favorite people to link everything to. Hillary Clinton is also, who never was president, is also a very attractive person to pin the tail on the donkey there. And it is particularly interesting to watch this unfold where, he loves data when it serves him, right? So just like 4 months ago, he was praising the jobs report and saying that the Trump recovery has gone so well, blah, 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 blah. But now with these revised numbers, he immediately fires a person in charge of producing this data. There is probably, they've been raising alarms at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and at other data collection agencies. This isn't the only, we have the census data, which has gotten significantly worse. American Community Survey, which happens more often than census data, is one of the largest and most important data sets for researchers. And one of the challenges with American Community Survey is that people just don't want to answer their door anymore. And door knocking is like a chunk of how ACS data is gotten. It's also gotten from calls. And so the American Community Survey data, which so many industries rely on, like a great example of like a ton of the ACS data that I used is data about median incomes and household incomes. Another type of ACS data that I used all the time was journey to work data, which tells you how people are getting to work. Like, are they working from home? Are they traveling to work? What zip codes are they traveling to and from? And all of that data is collected on a micro scale and then aggregated out by using statistical models, right? Like that's the basic of kind of data science. That is largely what I went to school for as an economist. Like this is like a big part of economic training is learning how to collect and work with these large data sets. And that's true for most of the social sciences because they tend to be heavily reliant on like creating good surveys and creating good data sets and then utilizing them and analyzing them. That kind of data is extremely important to industries. So a great example is like development centers. You know, you're planning 3 to 10 years out when you're looking at building new housing and you're looking at building like new suburbs. Unless you're China, in which case you're looking like 8 months out. I don't know. It's kind of crazy how fast they can do those things. And when you are looking at that data, and that data is weak because people are not responding to these surveys, because you aren't getting, because the agencies that provide that, so like a lot of this comes from state payroll data and stuff like that. When those agencies are like ridiculously understaffed, and so the data is getting to them worse, it makes it really hard to make decisions about like where to locate business centers, transit planning. So that's like a great example of like, where do we want to build highways? Where do we want to build subways and bus lines? All of that kind of data all of those kind of decisions rely on good data. And that data is getting worse as our old mechanisms of collecting data failed. Like, when is the last time that you answered an unknown number on your phone? Probably not, because they're not, most of the time you're like, why would I do that now? We already like have been dealing with eroding of a lot of this data over the past 20 years as fewer and fewer households have landlines. And landlines aren't even real landlines anymore in most places in the United States. Like, they're all VoIP now, right? So that like we already were dealing with that, right? So we were already having like an over selection bias for a couple years, for about 10 years, where when we were getting household data, we were getting overwhelmingly a sample that represented people that were Gen X and older who still had landlines in their house. And as a millennial, since I moved out of my parents' house, I have never had a landline. I had like a brief moment in time where I had SNAP benefits and they were like, hey, you can have a free landline. And we like looked into it and we were like, this is too much work. It's too much work. They're like, because you had to like submit and you had to set it up with a phone company or whatever. And we were like, whatever, we have cell phones. So the concept of having a landline has ceased to be a thing. As, you know, someone who's been a adult for 20 years, I have not ever had a landline in that time, and that was how a lot of polling data, economic data used to be created. So was the Chinese housing market having that issue, unfinished buildings, et cetera, before COVID, or just had set it up and then collapsed then? The collapse happened in 2022. COVID was part of the reason, but another part of the reason was over leveraging. So the unfinished buildings started to be an eyesore during COVID because of the 3 red lines policy, which was implemented in mid 2019, if I believe. Let me double check that. August 2020, actually. So the 3 red lines was in response to something that had been going on for several years, but you didn't start to see the like blight of unfinished buildings. I mean, unfinished buildings were everywhere in China but being worked on, right? So because development was so rapid and it was happening and it would happen so fast. But the idea of these buildings that are abandoned and unfinished, that started to really take off like late 2020 into 2021. And it got worse after the Three Red Lines policy and then the Evergrande collapse. And one of the reasons it got worse there was because, like I said, it was kind of this pyramid scheme. So like for a while, and that, I mean, that makes it sound like fraudy and shyster, but like a lot of economic systems really look like pyramid schemes if you zoom out, right? If you look at like macroeconomic and banking systems. So I'm not going to like, this isn't me trying to crap on it necessarily, but it does sound crazy that like you take the deposits that people put on another building and then you use them to pay for the construction of the other one. Like you just keep having to finance more and more buildings in order to sustain anything. And one of the things that I talked about on a live stream, I believe in 2021, was that so protests are extremely rare in China, right? Because of the system of government and how much speech is quelled. And one of the rare protests that was happening in 2021 was that people are actually refusing to pay their mortgages. So because people are paying their mortgages on unfinished buildings, right? You start paying your mortgage from like the moment that you have your deposit, you're still paying on these. And usually it might take years for that building to be finished, but you're like kind of paying into it. But because all of the progress had been stalled as these banks were collapsing, reorganizing, starting to default on their payments for their already leveraged debt that they were taking out to buy more buildings, people were starting to refuse to pay their mortgages in like a small act of protest. Okay, weren't the paycheck services numbers more consistent with the revised numbers? So, yes. I mean, the actual data, the revisions were not. There's a couple theories about why the revisions were so much bigger than historically. One of the big reasons is we always see heavier revisions when there's a lot of chaos happening in the economy. So if you see like big swings and big changes happening in the overall economy, you're going to see more revisions. And one of the reasons is because you use past data in order to interpret the whatever data is in front of you, right? So like if I'm looking at a data set, that the way that we extrapolate and interpret that data is based on historic numbers. An example would be like if I see that Oregon has a seasonal contraction in November. Historic data, you would look back and you'd go, oh yeah, well, there's a lot of seasonal workers that would be firefighting who usually wrap up in October, right? And so, as well as people that work on fisheries, right? To give kind of like a broad idea. So you've got these like seasonal adjustments that happen, and those are based on historic data. So we have these historic data sets that say like, oh, this is the smoothing of the data because of these seasonal swings. In, Florida, you're going to see higher jobs data in the summer months because more people visit Disney or whatever. Like that. By the way, these are based on me making up examples. These are not actual examples, but I'm sure both of those are probably fairly accurate. But when you're adjusting your data sets and when you're doing analysis on the data sets, you are using historical patterns in order to inform the interpretation of the data. If things are changing really rapidly in the economy, for example, suddenly there are no firefighters because the federal government laid off a huge chunk of their federal firefighters. I don't know. That's an example that maybe happened recently. If there's a lot of unusual things happening in the economy that historical data would not inform, you're going to see higher level revisions in the data because it takes longer to interpret that data, right? So one of the other things is, one of the other suspicions about why the revision was so large is because of the level of kind of chaos happening in the US. And chaos is the best word I can think of for it right now. Like, that's what it feels like every day, like living in this news cycle as like a human, but also as someone who works in the news cycle. It is very chaotic right now, and the economies don't like chaos. We just talked about this. Like, stock markets don't like uncertainty. We've been seeing these numbers like swing wildly. One of the things that happens with that as well is that we have been seeing the public sector get hammered with a lot of chaos and uncertainty right now. So, when we've got like federal workers that are getting laid off or are taking the, whatever path, and they, they're being asked to leave their jobs, but they're still getting paid. Those people, some of those people are either doing the work that then creates the data or are actually collecting the data. And so the state payroll kind of like processing timelines had gotten slowed down in quite a few states because of the level of chaos that's been happening. And because state budgets are heavily impacted by federal spending, right? So as we see like all the chaos with the big beautiful bill, as we start seeing DOGE like shutting down government agencies and stopping funds, we've seen this across like all of these sectors that influence the public sector. And when you see that, like Oregon is a great example. Like, we just decided that we were going to like lay off 500 employees from our Oregon Department of Transportation. Then we unlaid them off. And that was like not entirely due to the federal government, but it was mostly due to our state legislature, like not being able to pass a transportation bill. But that's a great example of like that kind of stuff is becoming extremely normalized right now. Like, we are still struggling to find out how many federal employees have been laid off in various agencies. Like, it's like rumor based a lot of the ways because of how chaotic it has been. So of course data is going to end up being more revised because either the data is slow getting from it's intentionally the way that we collect jobs reports is extremely decentralized with the idea that it is harder to tamper with, right? Because markets move on this data, and it's very important data for a number of other macroeconomic indicators and like overall market sentiment. And because of that, they put a ton of work into making sure it is decentralized. That's also true with how we collect our data about inflation prices. So the way that we actually collect data for inflation is a set of super secret, randomly selected grocery stores and products. And that is all kept super secret, and it's very decentralized so that we are able to get the basket of goods to determine like how much inflation has gone up, because inflation is also really important to all these other macroeconomic indicators. So essentially things got very confusing. And the idea that things have been like frustrating is the reason that things have been frustrating is that it has been just very hard to get data. So the idea that we'd have more visions is higher. I also wanted to talk about Turkey and Erdogan, but honestly, I feel like I'll have to talk about interest rates so much. And I don't know if people want to talk about interest rates via inflation. And I feel like I might need like a whiteboard in order to do that. I talked about it before, but I think I did have a whiteboard that time. Let's just say that President Erdogan of Turkey, who's been in power for like 22 years, Turkey's also having a backslide. They're farther along in their backslide away from democracy. Turkey is, President Erdogan has fired like, I don't even know how many, at least 3 directors of the central bank there. And that's because he was very, very opposed to the raising of interest rates. And everybody kept telling him that you have to raise interest rates, otherwise we're going to have inflation. And he didn't like the idea of that. And so he just kept firing every economist. And every economist is going to tell him the same thing. And he kept firing them and refusing to raise interest rates. And then they got hyperinflation. And their currency is hyperinflated. So now their interest rates are crazy high and they're at like 40% because Erdogan, after the election, kind of flipped on that. Okay. Y'all, I do have a donut and I want to talk about planners and we only have like 35 minutes left. So, the donut looks fantastic and I think we should eat it right now. And if you have any questions about economic data, or the 3 red lines policy in China, just because I love talking about the Chinese property market, we'll do that after the donut. Okay, we're going to do the donut, or we can talk about planners. Okay, this donut is, I think, pretty fantastic looking. It is a watermelon chamoy donut. So it's got a fresh juiced watermelon glaze, black sesame seeds on it, chamoy in the inside, and then it has a little sour watermelon candy, which I thought was excellently cute. It's very pretty. It's just a regular raised donut, and but with this chamoy, so I'm assuming it'll be a little spicy. I don't know what the base of the chamoy is, but maybe it's watermelon flavored because you can really put a lot of things in it. Can you remind me what the 3 red lines are? I love how you're like, there are 3 different rates of how much debt, assets, and equity that a company can have in China. Essentially, they limited how much debt these companies could be leveraged into, and then it caused problems because they weren't able to borrow for future payments. All right, we're going to see how this is. Oh, it's very sour, but not like in a Sour Patch Kid sort of way, but like if you got a plum that tasted like this, you'd be like, oh, that's sour. It's definitely, like real watermelon flavor and not like a fake sour one. Ooh. Okay. The chamoy, I think, has some watermelon in it. It definitely has some berries. And then it has like a good sugar spice situation in it. Oh, I can really taste the chilies now. I want to try to get like a bite with this in as much as this. What is chamoy? I'm probably pronouncing that very American. It's like a Spanish pickled fruit sort of situation. So you have to kind of imagine a jam that's pickled and it always has some chilies in it, but you can pickle all sorts of different fruits in it. Usually you have it with like little tasty little treats. Oh, if you've had Tajín, the spice that's like little salty, little sweet, little spicy, this is very similar to Tajín, but it's like with pickled fruit. I just got the whole sour watermelon candy in there. It's really good with the chamoy. That made it way better. Giovanni says, think it's Mexican. Yeah, it's absolutely, I think it's definitely Mexican. It's definitely Latin American. But I think it's Mexican. KWAP Comedy arrived just in time for the donut. Welcome. It's lovely to see you here. This is really good. Like, it's not too sour. The chamoy really adds something. I like the little fun of the candy. I do love a sour candy, so I'm very easy to please with that. The watermelon was real watermelon flavor. It was like not a concentrate where it's like super fake. It tasted like you were eating like the taste of a watermelon without it dripping down your mouth. Donut was excellent. I think you're right. This is shaping up to be a 5 out of 5. You are correct. This was a 5 out of 5 donut. I'm very excited we're on new flavors because look at this. I get to fill in my donut log again. So, watermelon chamoy, dough. Five out of 5. There we go. And that is our last one in this donut log. So date completed. 05 August. I almost wrote July. 25. I love how I essentially go through these in 6 months, but it makes sense because they have 33 in them. I do have a new one because Aaron got me one for my birthday. So I do think it would be funny to design my own just for me. Like design and print my own just for me. Aaron, I'm so glad that you made it through airport security without your ID. Aaron lost his wallet going through the TSA on the way out and is coming back. But in Portland, you don't have to use your ID anymore. So you just like give them your boarding pass. So, or sometimes you do it the other way around. Actually, you do it the other way around a lot of the time. The donut log is dead. Long live the donut log. Yes. It's going to be so much fancier. Okay. Who wants to talk about more about Trump firing the heads of agencies? It's very hard to keep track of all the people he's fired, but I guess that was his catchphrase when he was on reality television. Or who wants to talk about the planner that I bought that will be arriving next week that is going to solve all my problems? What do we think? Because I bought a new planner and it violates all of my provisions of what works in the world. And I blame the fact, like, I wasn't even really looking for a new planner because I'm like pretty happy in this little guy. And then I use this when I need a little more. Then these are Kinbors, so they were like very cheap relative to like the expensive planners that one can get. But they're probably not going to stay cheap because of tariffs. But I've been using this. It's working fine. But I started researching for 2026, and I mentioned last week that I was thinking about this Faded Chronicle planner, and then I decided it wasn't actually going to work for me. And then I started researching planners, and I got served an ad, and then I was like, oh my God, this planner is such a unique layout, and it is so unique that it's actually like patented layout. And I decided that I was going to get one. This was influenced by a couple things. One, I led the stationery store day ride this weekend and I spent far less money than I budgeted. Two, I think I mentioned that I've been putting off this invoice. Maybe I just mentioned it on the forums and on the live stream, but like I did a freelance gig for National Outlet like several months ago. And it was for NPR, and NPR like changed their whole internal invoicing system. And I could not be arsed to figure out how to to send the invoice because it's not simple, right? It's not just like send an invoice like you normally do. It's like you have to be in their system and then you have to do a thing and there's like and anyway, I really would not do it, but it was for quite a lot of money. And so I kept putting it off and putting it off and I finally sent that. And then I also made some money from a different gig that I was going to do that came in. And last but not least, I spent no money on stationery this year out of my business, which if you don't know, my business pretty much only spends money on hosting books for workshops, and because I teach all these workshops with low-income youth and youth that are homeless or transitional or aging out of the foster care system. And I use all of the Patreon money that I get from the, hey, look here, we have it, from the Personal Finance Society. So all of the money I get, it's like $300 a month. So it's not like a crazy amount of money, although I am so grateful to everybody that contributes to it. I use that to pay for hosting software and then for all of the books that I give out through those workshops. It doesn't pay for like all of the books, but it pays for enough of the books that I just kind of write it off against all of the other books that I sell. So when this was my full-time job, I had to like cut myself paychecks every month. And so I wasn't buying like stationery very often, but I was making more money through the business. Now that the business is like, doesn't make a ton of money, but makes enough to pay expenses, usually the extra money that's kind of left over, I will use a little bit of it on stationery because that's all essentially a tax write-off for me. I probably should use it on like cameras and like filming equipment or someone to edit or any number of other things. I also do most of my donations through the business because it's like easier and more straightforward to do it as a write-off. So I do like all of the stuff that I buy for my volunteering for a different thing, I write off as marketing expenses for the business. And when I give to like other charities and stuff like that. I got extremely off track here. Sorry, I'm going to take this off the screen. I got extremely off track. All this to say, I had like a little more money to play with stationery wise than I expected to. I was like, you know what I can do? I can get this planner as research. I can just get this planner as research. I got it as research. If you use my Patreon money on planner live streaming, I would be extremely into it. Well, that's good to know. I feel like most people probably want me to use it on the youth workshops, and I think that's extremely fair. Okay. Now it's going to show up. Here we go. There we go. So the planner that I got is from Laurel Denise. Please let me know if this can play. This is why it's so unusual for me. I usually hate coil bound or spiral bound. And I only recently have come around to horizontal planning since I moved into the Hobonichi Weeks. But part of the reason I'm on board with it is because, well, it's not the Hobonichi Weeks, the Kinbor Weeks. Part of the reason I'm on board with it is it's so small. So I got this mini version, and I think it could end up being really awesome for me. Oh, okay. Well, the cat's in a paper bag, in case you were wondering what that noise is. So you essentially get these little, like, week tabs that you can always view the month. And I can see this being really, really helpful for me because one of my biggest frustrations is the like flipping back and forth, and I'll fill in the month, but then I need to like refill it into the weeks. I think this could end up working. I did also listen to the entire bullet journal audiobook because I got it from the library. And I was like almost sold on a bullet journal. And then I realistically know I'm not going to do that. Like I am not going to set up a whole notebook manually by hand Geograph Concept says, I've basically written these off forever for me because they are huge. Well, this is the mini one. And I was very worried about it because the boxes are much smaller in the mini. So you can really tell that these are planner people because on their page, they have printouts that you can print out for all the different size of the planners so that you can see if you can write in the boxes. So the monthly calendar boxes are like really small on the mini. And so that you can like see on different size pens if your handwriting will fit into it. And I love the box sizes on the standard, but I agree, I do not want to take a giant one with me. But I'm starting to think that maybe what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm going to still have this as my in bag. Like if I'm going anywhere that isn't just to and from work, I might have this as my like take around planner, and then I'll transfer it into this slightly larger planner. I don't know, for the rest of the year. And because as you asked, it's an important live stream expense. K-Walk Comedy says, you talked about the invoice at least 3 weeks ago. Well, just to update you about the invoice, I hemmed and hawed over it for 6 weeks or longer. And then it took me about 20 minutes to deal with when I decided to deal with it. So, to be honest, much of what's keeping me sane right now is planner hype. You know, it's like, it is consumerism, but it's like consumerism where you convince yourself that you're going to be, it's like hypothetical consumerism because most of the time I'm not actually buying the planners. I'm just like looking at how other people use new planner layouts and convincing myself like that all the problems in the world will be better if I have this planner. I mean, one of the other ways that I am coping right now is developing this whole alternate fantasy life. I'm gonna go to law school. It's so dumb. I really should not go to law school. But I recently discovered that I qualify for in-state tuition at Ohio public law schools because I got my GED in Ohio. So I'm like an Ohio resident forever. And law school is like a third the price in-state in Ohio as it is in Oregon. And with the previous LSAT score that I got, which just to be clear was like 12 years ago. So who knows if I studied, I could get that again. And then I would have to retake it because they only last like 3 years. But with my previous LSAT score, which was pretty high, I would likely qualify for free tuition. So in my head, I am now coping with this idea that I'm going to go to law school. I love, this makes no sense for my life, for any choices that I am making right now. But it's always good to maintain an active alternate fantasy life in order to cope with the harshness of current reality. Geograph Concept says, I want to go to law school. You already have a master's, Geograph Concept. No more. I don't have any masters. So I feel like I should get, I need to get an advanced degree, my first advanced degree before you get your second. Law school is a good education, but it's also 3 years of opportunity cost. I'd still have to pay living expenses, which I could like do, but I wouldn't be earning money. And also it's very hard. And also I don't want to be a lawyer. So I will also say a lot of the things that make it a quote unquote good education are based on me now getting exclusively served law school videos on my algorithms now, because I looked up like 2 videos about going to law school in your 40s. And now I'm getting served like nonstop videos. And then TikTok is also delivering me like it's almost law school orientation for a bunch of people, for a bunch of 1Ls. And so now I'm getting like the I'm prepping for 1L law school or like advice for your 1L law school orientation. Anyway, in my I don't want to be a lawyer. I like my current job. I just am constantly left wondering when a job when that job will disappear, and that, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting shut down last week. I don't know if announced they were going to shut down last week. I don't know if you heard that. I mean, it doesn't directly impact my job yet, but it's not great. So oh, is the vertical stream up? Is Aaron do that in the Aaron said that he might do that. So thanks. Am I in the right part of the screen for the vertical stream? The only downside is that the chats are separated. So like I feel like you don't get to feel like you're included in the part of it. I talked to a bunch of law librarians and they have such a high rate of happiness and joy. Yet really? Is Kugel behind me? No, that's Machka. That's Machka. Kugel is a little loaf over there. Not visible. Consumerism is the new hope punk. Laurel Denise offers Giovanni has a important planner related question instead of law school related question. We're getting nice and sidetracked here. It has a horizontal versus a vertical layout. So the vertical layout I think I'm actually more into, but I'm not into it in the mini. I think the mini is going to be too small for it. So the vertical is like this. It's got lines to write in, which I do think is like a big advantage. There's a lot of very cool ways that you can like set these up. I love that it has this little like there's just a lot of very cool things about this. Will I hate it because either it's too big or because it's spiral? Possibly. We're going to find out. This is the one that keeps selling out that is, I think, the most interesting and the least like crazy. It's essentially so it's heavy though. It's still very heavy. So it's a 9x11, so it's essentially the size of like an A4 paper, I think. And it is but it's got bigger boxes to write in, and it essentially has a vertical layout. But with even bigger boxes. And for both the monthly and not the monthly, I think that this could be very cool. But it keeps selling out. I have gone fully down the Laurel Denise rabbit hole. They have an excellent YouTube channel. You can tell they're like very serious planner people because everything is just like a bunch of planner people. And they have it's called OMG Planners, and they have really good content, and they show you a lot of like how to use these. And they, I think, do an excellent job of like showing what it looks like. Like showing what it looks like in real life and showing examples of it. And they do like fictional spreads and stuff like that all the time. Anyway, maybe I need to just start becoming a planner YouTuber. I do feel like planning YouTube, I have discussed this. I mean, obviously it doesn't really matter because I am clearly not going for views. I'm just here to vibe and hang out with all of you on YouTube. But I do feel like if I started making edited content, the planner content, it tops out. Like there's a limited number of people that want to watch you do your planners, and they have a very high appetite, but there's only so many people in the planner world. But I could keep buying planners with my business money and then making planner content, and just perpetuate it itself that way. Isn't that what addicts say? Everything will be better if I just get my planner fixed. It is absolutely like a full-on addiction for a lot of people. I do think that there is a little bit of this, like, there are a lot of people with, I know it seems like all the planner people must be like just like heavily type A, hyper organized, but there's also a lot of people that have ADHD in the planner community that are using it as like a coping tool. But there's also a lot of people that just keep buying planners because they're so overwhelmed and stressed out by life. They're like, this one is going to do it. And there's a lot of people that just use it as a healthy hobby, right? Because for a lot of planner people, it's essentially an artistic hobby more than it is an organizational method. So yeah. AS says the uneven paper would drive me nuts. I'm actually eager to see what that's like, but I think anytime you're writing, we'll find out. It's 80-pound paper though, so it's like way thicker than something like this. Pretty much all the pen tests I've seen, the only thing that is going to bleed through is like a full-on Sharpie. So David says, I'm not here for the planners. I'm here for the camaraderie. Yes, but didn't you just say that you have an entire closet full of research? Well, that's the same thing. I will say that every time I think about, this is like, okay, a while ago, my yoga studio had like a happy hour or whatever. And I went to the happy hour, which I don't normally do because I'm there to go to work out and then leave. I'm not like really into the community thing. But a friend asked me to come with her to the happy hour. And at it, they were asking like, oh, would you ever do yoga teacher training? And I was like, I don't think we need another like white, queer, skinny yoga instructor in Portland. And I don't think I'm adding anything of value by occupying this space, right, for the yoga teacher training. So the only reason I would do it would be as like a personal challenge of like, you have to do the 200 hours or whatever. But if I was going to do it as like, because I always am thinking about, oh, what are the side job backup plans that I can have when journalism and especially public media journalism falls apart? I always am thinking about that. And obviously yoga teacher would be, it's very easy to slot in around other stuff. And I was like, oh, well, you know, I could see that because I could absolutely see myself as a group fitness instructor. But when I think about it, my best value would probably be teaching ice skating, right? Like there are a lot fewer people that can teach ice skating than can teach yoga in the world, right? There is, I have a more unique skill set that I have spent decades more honing than yoga. And so like if we were thinking about anything that I was going to spend my time on and do as a secondary hobby, I would go back through the PSA, like Professional Skaters Academy, like, training and like try to up my levels in figure skating coaching. Right. And I don't need to do that because that does not fit my schedule and it doesn't make any sense for me right now. And there's also a lot of drama going on right now in the Portland ice rinks. Like a bunch of the elite skaters are actually skating up near Seattle or out on the East Coast because of ice time, because of infighting among the rinks. And this is all coming back. It's all going to relate back. I promise. To me, this is the same thing as me doing planner content. I am adding nothing really to the planner world on the internet. I feel like I offer some unique value towards like economic and financial content, and there's fewer people that can do that. I have some level of training and skill and understanding that allows me to provide economic content and personal finance content. And I have worked for my licenses and my degree and stuff in order to bring that. I add no particular value as a planner. I'm not particularly artistic. I'm not even that like great at planner stuff. Do we really need another quirky white girl making planner content on YouTube. Probably not. Kenneth says there's a huge oversupply of yoga instructors. Yoga instructor training was big money for wellness influencers, gurus. Absolutely, right? So it's yet another one of those things that kind of looks like a pyramid scheme. No, I agree. And I feel like if there's anywhere where there's an oversupply, it would be Portland, Oregon. We need more short yoga teachers. Interesting. Like almost all of my yoga teachers are short. One of them teaches fat yoga, which I think is like really helpful. But if you think about it, yoga, the type of yoga, at least that I do, was originally designed for prepubescent boys. And so a lot of the positions are, especially in Ashtanga or Vinyasa, are not actually made for adult human bodies. They are made for a very specific group of prepubescent teenage boys being able to meditate longer. And there is a lot of adaptation that has to happen. If you have a lot of free time, you could help me come here and finish my apartment. The construction was the easy part. I don't, do you think I can't even finish my house? Some days the stars will align and the right planner will come along. I now view it as like the right planner comes at the right time. You're not like marrying the planner. You're dating the planner you only need to date it for like a year or in some cases 6 months. I did see, I lost it, but Geograph Concept asked if it was a 2026 planner. No, the planner I have, I got on sale a 2025 planner and I want to try out the layout while not having to commit to it. And their 2026 pre-orders don't start till October, which is like great because I will get a chance to try out the layout, but I will still have this to fall back on. And before I decide to spend a bunch of money, hopefully I will know. Hello, there's a bunch of new viewers. I am assuming you all came from the Vertical chat. Most planner influencers are too vapid. Bring on the quirky. I don't feel like most of them are too vapid. Maybe I've just been lucky in the planner influencers that I have. David says you can't have too many quirky people. I am absolutely afraid of commitment to one planner. I'm actually in a polycule of planners. It's ethical non-monogamy with my planners. B says yoga is one of those things I keep thinking I should get into. I'm stiff as fuck. I will say the main reason I started doing it is because I wanted to be doing committed flexibility and body weight strength training, but I needed like a schedule that was like there were a lot of classes, and all of the ones that I found that were like flexibility for weightlifting or blah, 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 they would be like one specific time a week and at one specific gym. And there's so many more yoga studios than there are like dance flexibility or anything like that. And I know how to stretch. Like I absolutely know how to stretch. I cannot make myself stretch for an hour every day unless you lock me in a room with someone telling me what to do and without my phone. And the like mindfulness part of yoga is also very helpful because I am someone who struggles with mindfulness. And once again, being locked in a room without my phone for an hour and a half every day, very helpful, like while awake, very helpful. And I do think it has net positive benefits that I get that are different than the benefits I get from other exercise. As someone who exercises a lot, like figure skating is, I think it is good for mindfulness because especially the type of skating I do requires like a lot of concentration. The downside with skating is that I really struggle with like comparison traps, especially like right now there's an Olympic gold medalist who's training skaters at my rink right now. So like I'm feeling very aware of promise lost and stuff like that and being like, why am I comparing myself to an Olympic gold medalist? Obviously that's unrealistic. And with yoga, there is so much focus on like, just focus on yourself. You're not competing with other people. I'm not even paying attention to other people. And it is very good for me for that in a way where I feel like running is also that way for me. Running is like I'm never worrying about like breaking records or doing better. I'm just trying to beat myself. And in skating, that's what we always say we want to do, but it can be really hard because you're training on a shared ice rink. And I have to work to remind myself that I'm only like competing with myself. I'm only that I've got my own goals. I'm not trying to compete with a 10-year-old who's, going to nationals next month. But yeah. We need more arthritic short yoga teachers. I should become a yoga teacher. This is not true. I don't know. I find it very, very helpful to have people teaching yoga that have experience with bodies that are not very cooperative. Theoretically, a good yoga studio and a good yoga instructor will know how to work around that, but they're not all that way. I don't know. I always have a little bit of a like complex relationship with yoga because I am not Hindu and I am often learning like the yoga studio I ended up choosing. I chose based on like its schedule and its proximity to my house and its price. And I do have a question of like, should I be giving money to the more authentic yoga studio that is like run by, like monks that is in Portland or, I don't know. I do a lot of like conversations with myself, but for me, it is about the stretching and the body weight workout with the mindfulness. And like I would just go to like a bar studio if I needed to, but once again, they are more affordable and there are more of them for yoga. And I think as long as I honor the cultures and practices and I'm not trying to package it and resell it. But I do constantly wonder, like, am I contributing to, once again, the people that are profiting off of this are like queer white ladies or white passing ladies in Portland who own this yoga studio as opposed to the cultures and practices that have based it. But it's also like yoga is so old and so many cultures have absorbed it. There's so many different styles of yoga that are all kind of wrapped up into one. And I kind of view the Americanization, like the fitness industry version of it, as just being another one of those styles. Like it's not even one religion's type of practice. And I don't know. I go back and forth. I go back and forth on this. And this is one of the reasons why I'm never going to like advocate. But I do think it is better focused on being able to like there were a lot of things that I did tons of PT and OT to do. Like I went to my occupational therapist in 2022 and I told her like I want to be able to do push-ups flat on the floor. I want to be able to do 5 push-ups flat on the floor because of my wrists I've always had to use push-up handles or do them on my knuckles, which can be really hard on obviously my knuckles. Because I can't bend my wrists this way. And I've broken both of my wrists as well as having rheumatoid arthritis. And the occupational therapist just went, it's good to have goals. She's like, I'm never going to tell anybody that they can't do something. And she gave me exercises for it. But like, she kind of set in my mind that it was like not going to be possible to get to the point where I was able to do like handstands and push-ups flat on the floor again with the level of like metal and arthritis in my wrists. And the advantage of yoga, because 1, you can always modify, and 2, because I was doing it as a progressive practice, and I was doing more than I was doing even when I do my OT and PT at home. And I can now do like 15 push-ups flat on the floor, and I do every day. And that was because of very intentional working through yoga, but in many ways less like challenging, and I more progressively loaded it doing yoga than other things. And that isn't to say that like yoga is a magic it didn't fix my disability. And I think that any person that has a chronic illness or a disability has heard, have you tried yoga? And I'm not gonna like say it as a tool for that. I will also say if you are in a sport like mine where you need to have very specific types of flexibility and you need to have like way more of it than normal people should. I'm just going to say normal people. Like in figure skating, there are positions that we are expected to do with our body that like there is no reason you need to do that in regular life, right? That's also true in dance. It's true in like pole, all sorts of other kind of sports, martial arts. And um yoga is not as good at building that specific flexibility if you're doing it in the standard kind of flow set way that it is sold at fitness studios in the US. I get around that by going in 15 minutes before all my classes start, which is when the studio opens, and I do all my PT, all my OT, my targeted like figure skating kind of movements that I need to do, and then I stretch my splits, which is not a thing I get an opportunity to do in class very often because like most people don't need their splits. But I do it officially more than and more consistently than I ever did before. Do you love that we were talking about economic data and now we're talking about this? I come for the donuts, stay for the planners, and occasional economic learning. As long as you include enough washi tape or journals, I'm cool with planners. I like this thing. Okay, yoga is like Xerox or ketchup. It's now generic. I know, which is like kind of a shame. It's kind of a shame. But it is really interesting because there's a lot of overlap between like kind of woo sort of stuff, especially in Portland, like West Coast sort of studios, wherein like, do I need to get astrology with my yoga? No. But I also think that it is very like something I've worked to be much better at is open-mindedness and not being skeptical towards people's like beliefs or things that bring them solace. Like when I was younger and growing up, I really treated like religious practices as like, oh, that's extreme. And that a lot of that had to do with like not being Christian and having Christian kids like treat me and treat me like crap and try to push the religion on me. And I then met people that I saw were working towards the good in the world and Tikamola and trying to do it through the power of their religion. Like they viewed their religion as something that brought them a great deal of solace and made them work for good in the world. And I've come to respect that. And one of the things that I think is like, as I've grown more mature and I've aged, I've worked very hard on being like, just because it isn't an official religion doesn't mean that this belief system doesn't have value. And official religion, right? And if someone believes something that isn't harming someone else and is bringing them comfort in ritual, in rules, in the way that they look at the world, in trying to make them better at themselves, like I'm willing to hear it out. And I used to really like living on the West, being a West Coast queer, I got to tell you, I had like an apartment in Eugene where they like needed my time of birth in order to figure out if we would be good roommates because they needed to run our charts. And that was the kind of thing that would make me immediately be like, yeah, we're not a good fit. And now I sort of respect the idea that it is a tool for learning about yourself, just like anything else. It's like reading Nietzsche or Rumi. And I think most people view it as all in good fun and a learning tool just the same. And so anyway, I think about it in the same perspective. Sol Ace is so Pacific Northwest Actus. It's always solace here. Solace is a vegetable. Solace is a vegetable. What is Sol Ace? Oh. I've heard really good things about Pilates, but I'm more afraid of Pilates. Yoga, I do a lot by myself at home. Pilates is, I've done a lot of Pilates as well. Pilates is like very expensive if you do it in a studio. It's easy to do Pilates by yourself at home if you're doing mat Pilates. I will also say Joseph Pilates developed it while in a concentration camp. And so all of the stuff can be done with no equipment. And all of the stuff that he ended up developing, like the reformers and those really expensive pieces of equipment, they're not necessary in order to do it I love Pilates, but once again, it came down to like it's more expensive and there's fewer studios. Yoga, man, it's cheap. It's cheap comparatively. I mean, I still spend a lot of money on it, but I spend a lot of money on fitness relative to almost everything else. Y'all, Pilates was a person's name. Didn't know that. Learn something new every day. Yeah, Joseph Pilates. He was an Italian immigrant and a strong man. And when World War II broke out, he was put into a internment camp in, I believe, the Isle of Man, because he was in the UK. He developed this whole system, and kind of part of the origin story of the Pilates exercise method is that the people that were in the camp with him had a much higher rate of survival than because they were doing the Pilates exercises, which he developed the original reformer with springs in the bed in the infirmary at the internment camp that he was in. He eventually moved to New York City, and Pilates became a method for the great rich people of New York City. So he's German. I thought he was Italian. Yeah. So he eventually moved to New York City and started selling this, and it became sworn by a lot of like actresses and dancers, and it was done as cross training. But I really thought he was Italian though, not German. I guess he was German. Also, maybe I just thought because Pilates sounds more like a German name, or it sounds more like an Italian name than a German name. But that's why he was in an internment camp. And it was during World War I, not during World War II. America, what a country. Yep. Kenneth says Pilates has changed a lot. Yes, but you can still do all of the core things. But also yoga has too. Do what I've done. Ask them what happens if you don't accept their savior. When they tell you where you're going, ask loudly around the room who wants to come with. I don't like to be antagonistic about that. You know, Jesus makes a lot of people happy. So, you know, good for them. OT, try to be nice at least. I know. All right, y'all, I am officially 15 minutes late to my next meeting. I'm so bad. Y'all need to tell me what you're looking forward to this week, and I need to go. We have really run the gamut. Maybe by this time next week, I'm going to have my new planner, and it will have solved all of my problems, and it will solve the economy. What do we think? We think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to get a new planner, and all of my problems will be immediately solved. I think that's absolutely what's going to happen. Geograph Concept is looking forward to working the weekend again. I want to know, did you have fun working the weekend last week? Because it was what you were looking forward to, and I guess you're looking forward to it again next weekend. So you must still be. David says, I only do that when they get annoying about it. Now that I've lived on the West Coast for like 20 years, I don't really get nearly as many people trying to convert me. When I lived in the Midwest, it happened a lot. Fuzzbubble says, yes, that's true. That's how planners work. Absolutely. Looking forward to kids coming back to school. Last year, let's go. That's great. Fantastic. How's your family doing? Are you going to be starting, or are you still going to be out on FMLA? But I'm excited for you. I'm glad you're excited about the kids coming back to school. I feel like that's not always people's attitude in their last year of working in education. So Giovanni says my bet's on the planner. I like that's all we've got now. It's like some people need astrology and the rest of us just need planner peace. There's the concept of Nirvana, there's the concept of Mecca, and then there's the concept of planner peace. Yeah, I think like several religions are damning me to blasphemy after this live stream today. I've managed to offend probably quite a few people if people are watching. I go to Philadelphia for the first time since third grade, hoping to go to Independence Hall, the National Jewish Museum, a keyboard con, and hop on hop bus. That would be also my itinerary. Also, if you have a chance, like if you're over there because you might go past the Liberty Bell, you just have to walk past the Liberty Bell. Like don't like it's very tiny and it's not that exciting. But the is it Susan B. Anthony? Wait. Who sewed the flag? Now I can't remember. Betsy Ross. So Betsy Ross, a little controversial of a character, but I did find the little living history museum of Betsy Ross's like her workshop and her business to be kind of cute. And it's quite close to the Liberty Bell and like kind of that whole central area. You can walk around a lot of Philly, I feel like. Probably because it's such an old town. That's my other recommendation. But that's exciting for you. But keyboards are obviously the most important part. Back from FMLA, mom is on the mend. Thanks for remembering. I'm so glad your mom is on the mend. It sounds like it was very stressful. I'm glad you had access to FMLA. The witnesses showed up at my door recently. So the witnesses are like real heavy near the hospital university that I bike past on my way home from work. And I love looking at the fashion outfits of the women. So the outfits of the women, because they have like pretty strict dress code in Jehovah's. And if you are doing your service time of like spreading the word, they tell you to wear bright colors, but you have to wear like long coats and everything. So anyway, I like looking at the fashion moments. Also, our Jehovah's Witnesses in Portland are like overwhelmingly Black, which is notable in a city that is not have a very high Black population. But generally, Jehovah's Witnesses are like, it's like there are, I think it's like 50% Black as a religion, although I think we never have official stats on them. Betsy Ross House was another school trip, field trip fave. See, there you go. My comic book store is having a huge tent sale this Saturday. That sounds amazing and very dangerous for your budget. The last time Jehovah's Witnesses showed up at my door was actually the FBI. Aaron, I feel like we should end the stream now with that. I know where that anecdote is going, but I'm not going to let you explain anymore. I'm very interested about that. Sophie's going to tourist around Portland. That sounds very fun. Yes, that's smart. You should only tell that in person. Okay, y'all have a lovely week. I am officially very late for my next meeting. Stay safe, stay hydrated. Pet a cat if you have one available. Have a great kids coming back to school, going to Philadelphia, working weekends. And maybe go get a planner because it obviously will save the world. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and I will see you all next Tuesday. Bye!